Hello, everyone. Just wanted to welcome you in. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides here. So just to start us off, I wanted to go ahead and welcome everyone. If you have any questions throughout the time, please make sure you are using the question button right here. And then your camera and microphone should be off. If you would like to sign up for any other sessions, please sign up through www.oacac.org, and the recording will also be available at that website as well. So if you want to go ahead and start us off.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks everybody for bearing with us as we got everything started, and good evening and welcome to our OACAC panel on navigating the application process during a pandemic. My name is Tyler Bradshaw and I am an Associate Director of Admission at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio.
And my name is Tom Fanning. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Undergrad Admission at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, Ellen, you're actually muted.
Sorry. We came back in after having that difficulty. Hi, everyone. Happy to see you. My name is Ellen Turner, and I'm the Senior Associate Director of Admission at Kenyon College, located in Gambier, Ohio. And we are delighted that you are here with us this evening. We hope that you will
Ellen, just real quick, you will need to share your screen because we're not seeing the PowerPoint.
I'm going to, as soon as we finish with these little announcements, I will do that. So today, or this evening, we'll be using the question and answer function. And if you have questions during our presentation and you don't want to wait to the end to ask them, feel free to submit them through the question and answer function, because our good friend Tom will be monitoring that and be able to send us questions as they happen. We want to thank you so much for being here tonight, and I am going to share my screen right now, but I will not get started with our PowerPoint, with our slideshow just yet. Hang on one second. Okay. So we want to thank you very much for being here tonight. My colleagues and I represent almost 80 years of experience evaluating college and university applications. Both the college search process and this college application process can be defined as odysseys. If done well, they can be transformative in a person's life. Students progress through each of these journeys, both the college search process and the college application process, at different speeds. By September, some have it all figured out, and others are just beginning. Tonight, we will be focusing on the application process, but we will also refer back to the search process while we're focusing on this application process. It is our hope to illuminate your journey regardless of where you are in the moment. Some individuals find one or both of these journeys to be complex and sometimes stressful, and that's under normal circumstances. Given the pandemic, we all find ourselves in a world that is very different from what we would describe as normal. It is our hope to provide you with some information that will serve as guideposts for this journey. Tom's going to start us off with some general information and reminders about the college application process. Tom?
Sure. Thank you, Ellen. So what we want to talk about here would be overall general issues here, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the challenges with COVID. But truly, as you start your process, realize that one of the most common ways we communicate with prospective students is through email. So it's probably not a bad idea to create a separate email address to keep everything in order, because that's going to be a challenge, as I said, because that's the way most of us communicate with people. Make sure that email address reflects your mature outlook on life. Don't join the email hall of shame with some of the handles you might choose. And not only have that email address, but you really need to keep a watch on it. Read your email, make sure you check that inbox box often, because that is one of the main ways we're going to be contacting students, prospective students, through the course of this process. It's also a smart idea to keep track, maybe build a spreadsheet with all the details that include deadline dates and different materials that are required, because they can differ from school to school. So and this is your responsibility to keep track of all of this. You also want to be working on developing that college list. You know, every college would have profiles listed out on their websites, so you can see middle 50% ranges, maybe with grade point averages. And I'll talk about testing in a second, but to get some idea of a good, adequate list of schools where you might very well be competitive relative to their profile. If you're unsure about this, check with your college counselor, because they're probably there to be able to give you some good advice about how all of this works. Then follow the instructions very carefully. As I said, you are responsible for this. It's kind of a test of your responsibility, which is a pretty important trait when you hit college. And you don't want to miss deadlines, so you need to keep track of the different admission plans of the different schools you're looking at, and that's where that spreadsheet can come in handy. So now these are pretty general, helpful hints on the overall general college selection process, but we all realize that we're in interesting times with COVID-19. And we want to, we'll talk about some of the details in a second, but it's very important that you keep contact with all the schools you're looking at. Many schools have gone test optional, and a little later in our presentation today, we're going to talk in more detail about that. But you're going to need to keep contact with the schools you're looking at to make sure you're following the rules that they have set in place. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, who's going to talk about communication with universities and colleges, and also who's going to talk a little bit about visiting campuses and virtual visits to get the feel for the institutions you're looking at.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. So in the age of COVID, communication with admission offices really takes on a new level of importance. And I'm going to review some ways in which that communication can be most useful and most beneficial to you as a student, and also any families that may be out there. The first thing is in talking about websites. Colleges and universities' websites are full of excellent information. We have lots of folks behind the scenes that spend hours and hours designing these websites, so they're easy for you to read, also easy for you to locate information. So we want you to actually use those. Be sure that you're exploring those websites to locate answers to your general questions about any college or university. And it might also be helpful to develop a list of questions that you use to explore each university. And again, that spreadsheet that Tom mentioned will be super valuable there. Stay current with the electronic information that's out there. Once you've decided where you're applying, stay up to date with the websites of those institutions. Given the pandemic, some colleges and universities are going to be updating procedures for the application process as we go. This is brand new territory for many of us. We are making decisions on the fly and trying to make sure we're doing things that are in the best interest of students. So it really is to your advantage to stay up to date and not just visit a website once, but potentially visit it multiple times. And that's a great reason just to keep checking. Maintain a presence by connecting with the admission office to ask meaningful questions when you can't find the information on the website. So again, that first response, first question that comes to your mind, the first place to go would be the website. But then if you're on the website and you just simply can't find it, reach out to that admission office, to people like me and Ellen and Tom, who are more than happy to help you navigate that website and find the answer to your question. Finally, I want to spend a moment just talking about demonstrated interest, and that might be a little bit of a new concept to some of you. Some admission offices consider demonstrated interest in the admission process, and they'll factor that into their admission decision. And that means that the student's interest in that college or university might play a role in the admission decision. There's lots of different ways that you can demonstrate your interest in a school. Sometimes it's reaching out to the college and the recruiter who's working with you. Other times it might be going on a campus visit or sitting in on an interview. And colleges really use demonstrated interest to varying degrees. Some might use it heavily throughout the entire process. Other institutions might use it when it comes to waitlist decisions or students that they're on the fence about. So really, it's a great idea for you if you're especially those top schools you're interested in. If you're interested in those, somehow demonstrate your interest to that institution to let them know. Being able, I want to talk about visits as well. Being able to visit a college or university can make a tremendous difference in how you see the institution. All the things you see in brochures and postcards, it really brings those things to life. But unfortunately, COVID has impacted the visiting opportunities at many different colleges and universities. So we've got some helpful tips here that we want to share. If possible, try to visit the colleges and universities which interest you the most. Be sure to check out the website to make sure they're open to visitors. Definitely in the age of COVID and what we're dealing with, you don't just want to randomly show up without having registered ahead of time. You want to make sure that you're following all the proper rules and staying within the guidelines that colleges have used to protect the safety of their students. If a school is hosting an in-person visit, like I said, be sure to register. And many colleges and universities, though, are going to be restricting visitors to campus, or some may not even be welcoming visitors to campus in any way. Make sure, again, this is your responsibility, that you know the college or university's policy on visiting. And if you're unsure, check the website, then call and ask. If you are wanting to visit an institution but no in-person visits are available, that's when you start to kick into virtual visits. And some of these are going to be like a virtual link available on the website. Again, many institutions have put that kind of on the front landing page so you can find it quickly. Most virtual visits, like information sessions, are going to ask that you pre-register ahead of time for that live webinar type setting, because the college or universities has students or staff that's going to be meeting with you in person virtually. So they need to know how many people they're going to be interacting with in those moments. So again, just fill out any appropriate registration forms. Many colleges and universities are also going to be offering those virtual visit days to their campus. And if you have the time, these programs can be really rewarding and useful. Generally, this type of program will last for more than just a half hour or an hour-long visit. And most colleges and universities are making virtual visits to your high school. So Ellen and Tom and I are really missing out on staying in Hampton Inns all over the state of Ohio for like 60 nights in September and October, but we're not giving up. We're reaching out to you in some new ways. So your guidance counselors or your high school counselors in your high school should be pushing out opportunities for you to meet with individual schools like Miami or Case Western or Kenyon. So sign up for those schools that interest you. And if a virtual visit conflicts with a class, go to class and send a note to that admission officer who was making the virtual visit to just say that you have a class that you didn't want to miss, but that you'd like to learn more about the institution in another way. He or she might even be willing to meet with you at another time, and that really depends on their volume and the availability of their schedule. But those are some great tips for navigating the visit and virtual visit process. Now Tom is going to review some other good sources of information about the colleges and universities that might interest you.
So beyond all of the opportunities that Tyler just laid out in front of you, there are other ways you can learn about colleges, and I think some of these are great ways you can round out your knowledge of a college. One opportunity is talking to personal friends, neighbors, people that graduated last year who have gone off to college. You know, to a certain extent, when you talk to admission people, we're paid to say good things about our institutions. And students who pay their tuition dollars can say whatever they want to say, and you can get a lot of good information from people who are at the institutions now. So we'd encourage you to talk to your friends who have gone off to college and learn more about what life is like at the institutions you're looking at. If a school offers you the opportunity to interview, realize that that's an opportunity to meet somebody who might very well be reviewing your file at some point. Truly, an application almost it basically turns into 25 screenshots. And for all the people I've met in my career, you're so much more complex and so much more interesting than those screenshots. And an interview gives you an opportunity to shine with somebody, again, who might very well be able to provide some input in the admission process. So you can put your own personality tied to all those numbers that come in the data we receive on the applications. It's also a good time to point out that if you are an athlete and connecting with the coaches at some of the institutions that you might be looking at, it's good to keep contact with them, because they may very well be able to provide information to admission offices about your ability to be a game changer around the fields, around the courts, and some of the campuses you might be looking at. So it's not a bad idea to keep contact with other connected individuals like coaches or music teachers and things like that who you might be working with on the college campuses. You can also look in the college guides, and there are many of them. I know that the U.S. News and World Report rankings have just come out because all of those emails were just distributed. Realize, though, that talking to somebody at the institution probably gives you the best information about the schools you're looking at, but those guides can provide some great data as you start to compare your colleges and universities. So now moving forward, Ellen's going to talk a little bit about some of the general tips to remember when completing your applications, and she'll also provide some considerations for the application itself.
Thanks, Tom. So a couple of things that are important when we're thinking about doing the application itself. Tom mentioned this earlier at the beginning with his general helpful hints, but it bears repeating. And we can't stress this enough. Make sure you proofread and spell check your application. It's critical. Be careful not to write about the advantages of going to Hamilton College when the application is actually going to Cornell University. All of us have seen examples of that where students are rushing and they do a cut and paste job and they forget about the fact that they have another college actually listed in their application or in an essay, especially through a supplemental essay. So be really careful of that. It's very important to proofread. Can't say that enough. Make sure that you're aware of the colleges that require supplemental essays. And this is another great thing to keep in that spreadsheet that Tom talked about, to keep you organized. If a college or university requires a supplemental essay, you want to be on top of that. That's really important. Choose the writers of your recommendations wisely. You should aim to ask a teacher or teachers who have taught you a core subject and who know you well. Try to select teachers from your junior or senior year if possible. We do understand, though, that last year was interrupted and this fall is a little strange too. So it's best to make sure that the teacher whom you ask, you've had a conversation with them about your goals and what interests you and that kind of thing, so that they can think about you a little bit more broadly than just who you are in their class. They will write about what you have done in their class, and that's important. But oftentimes they will ask you for some additional information, and that's absolutely fine to share with them. Most high school guidance counselors will also provide what we call a school recommendation or an overview of some kind. Check with your individual guidance counselor about their procedure. Some high schools do not produce a school recommendation. In those situations, it's certainly fine to ask another teacher for a recommendation. What you want to be careful of is that you don't send in too many recommendations. All of us are restricted somewhat by the amount of time that we have. So pay attention to what the college asks in terms of the number of recommendations that they want. Most colleges or universities do not need more than 2 recommendations unless they require a specific one for a scholarship to which you are applying, or a recommendation for a particular talent that you might have if you're trying to get a place on a band or what have you. And we're talking about a wide range of schools here. So different schools have different processes. And again, it's really important to make sure you've read their instructions on their websites. And if you can't find that information, as Tyler suggested, it's good for you to reach out to one of us. We're always happy to help you if you cannot find that information for some reason. You want to be careful, I said this a little bit earlier, you want to be careful about how many additional recommendations you have. And you only want to have an additional recommendation if it enhances your application substantially. It's not helpful to ask for an alumni recommendation if the recommender does not really know your capabilities well. They're a friend of your Aunt Sally who went to the college or university, but they don't really know you. Because Aunt Sally is their next door neighbor, and Aunt Sally asks you to ask the person to write a letter of recommendation for you, but they don't really know who you are. That kind of recommendation isn't helpful for you. And quite frankly, when we're going through them, we just stop when we've read the first couple lines of something like that, because it's not useful to us. We're most interested in the recommendations that come from teachers and guidance counselors, or somebody maybe who has been a supervisor for you in a work experience. That would, though, only be in addition to the academic recommendations, which we would want first. Finally, when you're doing your application, make sure that your activities list is accurate and complete. Feel free to add some of your activities that may have been changed due to the pandemic. And actually, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more specifically here. Things may be very different, and you may have had things that have been canceled on you. Clubs, activities, in some cases, whole sports seasons have been eliminated for some students across the United States. So it begs the question, what are you doing with your time? If in fact these things that you have been involved with throughout your career are now not a part of who you are or part of what you're doing. So it's absolutely fine to add new activities and say, you know, due to the pandemic, I'm involved in this or what have you, and that could be really a useful thing. Babysitting siblings or caring for an elderly relative so parents can get their work done is actually something that is, you know, you're spending a lot of time doing that. If you are, mention it in your application. That's fine under an activity. You might also choose to write about how you're using your time. What have you learned about yourself given the change in your activities? If there is a place to write about this, do so. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the COVID-19 question that is asked on the application. You can also talk about this in an interview. It's a great piece of your life to be able to share with us about how you've adjusted to changes. And just if your activities have changed, be sure to indicate how they have changed and the impact that it has made on you. If you've been introduced to a new activity because of the pandemic, definitely make sure to mention it. Some students may choose to highlight one activity and its impact on them in the primary essay. Others will follow a path that is totally different and address a different topic. Regardless of which path you choose, the essay's impact will be significant this year. My colleague Tyler will discuss some important tips for the essay.
Yeah, Ellen, you're exactly right. The essay really has always been a very important consideration of the application, but this year it's likely going to receive some heightened scrutiny because we're just in a year when many schools are test optional, and we're going to talk about that a little later on, and when there are transcripts that may reflect grading changes due to the pandemic. Remember that colleges want to evaluate not just what you write, but how you write. Do you produce clear, succinct prose? Are you descriptive? Are you visual? Are you imaginative? Are you ready to deal with the demands of college writing? So when it comes to picking a topic, which is one of the most crucial pieces of doing this well, select a topic that differentiates you or is about something that you're passionate about. I always tell students, don't pick that common denominator essay, right? That essay that anybody could write about. You have to pick that one essay that only you can write about. It's best to avoid your experience of COVID-19 because that's a common denominator situation. Everyone is dealing with the pandemic. So write about something that has changed your way of thinking or looking at the world, or write about an experience that provided you with a tremendous growth moment. How has that experience changed you, and how was that experience unique? The Common Application provides 7 different topics from which you can choose. And again, your goal is to really differentiate yourself from the rest of the applicant pool. Now, one kind of unique thing this year, both the Common Application and the Coalition Application have added a separate COVID-19 question, which you can answer if you or your family have been significantly impacted by the pandemic. And the key word that I want to stress there again is significantly. Taking classes online might feel significant, but The reality is almost everyone has had that experience with virtual learning since last spring, so this might not be as significant as you think. You have to think about significance in the context of the rest of the applicant pool. So the COVID-19 question really is best attempted by those whose families have experienced significant illness or financial impacts or changes due to COVID-19. So again, that is an optional question. You do not have to answer that question. Only answer it if the answer is significant. Now we're going to talk about another piece of the application, and that would be the high school transcript. So Tom is going to take over and discuss the importance of the high school transcript when we evaluate applications. And Tom, you are muted.
I can't believe I did that. What a major faux pas for all the Zooms that we do. So none of us are perfect. Let that be a lesson. So when we're talking about a student's academic performance, the high school transcript is really the main vehicle with which to review a student's competitiveness and readiness for collegiate work. And realize the pandemic may very well have changed the way some transcripts will look. If your school went to a pass, no pass, or a pass, fail option, colleges are prepared to handle this. In fact, we always deal with different transcripts because we have applications from so many different high schools, and they're all different. So you'll have to trust that we'll be able to handle all the differences that might come into play here. So the first thing you have to do when you start applying to your college is you're going to have to make sure your college counselor at your school knows where you're applying, because they're going to have to send, in most cases, the official transcripts from your school. And along with those transcripts, typically they will send a profile that explains what is on the transcript, the grading scales, and any intricacies of the way your school runs assessments. So that's pretty common practice that we'll receive those, the transcripts and the profiles, but it's your responsibility to request them from your school. So make sure you get that done. So now COVID-19's impact on transcripts. As I said, we're prepared for any challenges or any changes that are going to happen because of the interesting times we live in. So you're going to have to trust that, and you're going to have some contact with your high school office, the college counseling office, and to be assured that any changes that might have happened are explained. Many times they are. But also, I think it's your responsibility to make sure that if there are changes, that it is being relayed to the colleges so we can try and figure out. Frankly speaking, so many of our colleges organize with territory managers. And in my territory, I would be in charge of relaying to our committee members any changes in the transcript or what the grading scales are and so on. So, but if you learn or realize that explicit explanation is not going out to the colleges, you may very well be in a position where you would want to explain that. And there are a couple different vehicles you can use to do that. Tyler talked earlier about the COVID essays and such, but it's probably a good idea to check with your college counselor to learn what kind of explanation is going to go out. I also want to make note that in our ever-changing world, some schools are moving to a situation where they're allowing you to self-report transcript information for the admission process. And if that's the case, you're going to want to follow those directions pretty closely, the directions that a college might give you on how to do that. And if you have questions, you're going to want to relay those to the college that you're looking at, or even get some guidance from your college counseling office. So realize that may be an option at some of the schools you're looking at, and more than a few colleges are considering that option as well. So at this point, earlier in this presentation, we mentioned that many colleges and universities are test optional for 2021, at least for this application season. So I'm going to turn the mic back over to Tyler to talk a little bit about the intricacies and some of the changes in test requirements that have been brought about by this pandemic.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so one of the big impacts of COVID-19, and I feel like there have been so many of them, has really been the challenge of maintaining safe test environments for standardized tests like the ACT or the SAT. The result ended up being the cancellation of many of those standardized test dates, especially last spring. And I'm sure some of you out there joining us tonight experienced those cancellations. As such, many colleges and universities, wanting to do what's in the best interest of students, have reevaluated their testing policies for this upcoming admission cycle. So a couple notes about test optional policies, and you see that message on the screen. All test optional policies are not created equal. You have to keep that in mind. Every school is going to have a little bit of a nuance. So be aware that differences in test policy will exist from institution to institution. Currently, there are more than 1,400 colleges and universities that are listed as test optional. Be sure to consult the website of the colleges or universities where you're applying to see if you're going to need test scores. And it's more than just test optional yes or no. It's about delving a layer deeper than that to understand how that fits within your specific situation, because some institutions are completely test optional and others might require a test for admission to a certain program, like really competitive programs like maybe nursing or business or engineering that typically have some additional requirements, or they might require it for a scholarship. So be sure that you're keeping track of the different policies on your applications planning spreadsheet that we talked about earlier. A test optional column with a little bit of room for notes will probably be the most beneficial there. If you did take a test prior to March of 2020, which just feels like ages ago, and it was only a few months, and it was a good result, you're still welcome to submit the score to the institution. Test optional does not mean we don't look at the test. Test optional just means it's up to you as the student to decide if you want us to look at it or not. So you should really be judicious and strategic when you're submitting your test scores, especially if none are required. And the expert that you want to talk to, that would be your high school counselor, your guidance counselor. Have a conversation with that individual about each school you're planning to apply to and whether or not test optional is the way to go. Now, before we open up the presentation to any questions you've come up with throughout our time together, my colleague Ellen's going to address issues related to financial aid as they might relate to the application process in the pandemic.
Thanks, Tyler. And Tyler, that's a good reminder to folks. If you have questions, go ahead and start sending them through our Q&A function, because we're going to have to go pretty quickly with them. We're hoping that StriveScan is going to give us a couple more minutes because we ended up starting late due to some of our technical difficulties here. I'm going to say a couple words about financial aid. Again, this is another really important aspect of the college application process that you're going to chart on that spreadsheet, because college is expensive and the process can be daunting for many reasons, but one of the biggest is college cost. And while college can be expensive, research shows that college graduates ultimately end up making significantly more money over their lifetimes than do those without a degree. So finding out how you can afford colleges is really key. Many colleges have what is known as the net price calculator on their websites. Some even have some other applications that you can utilize to find out exactly how much you and your family would be expected to pay based on a federal formula if in fact you're applying for need-based aid. There are two types of aid. There's need-based and merit-based. Most institutions offer both. Again, you want to check on a website to see what is available with each institution that you take a look at. Deadlines, keep track of them. Some financial aid and scholarship deadlines are different from college admission deadlines. Be sure to keep track of them on your college application spreadsheet that Tom told you you should be developing. Stay organized. Make sure that you know the paperwork that's required by each institution. Oftentimes it will be the FAFSA, which is the free federal form for applying for financial aid, or the CSS profile, which is administered by the College Board. Oftentimes colleges require a copy of your parents' tax returns and supporting documents. So be sure that you know what paperwork is required. For some merit-based scholarships, you may be asked to submit a portfolio of writing or art or a tape of music or an acting performance. Be sure you know what is required for a merit-based scholarship application as well. Use that application spreadsheet wisely. Finally, ask for help. If you cannot find an answer on the admissions or financial aid website of the college or university, please get in touch with us, those or our colleagues who are just like us at other colleges and universities, because admissions officers and financial aid officers are eager to help you and your family. And I think we have, yay, we have 5 minutes left. So if there are questions or concerns, we would love to hear them from you. And I'm going to stop sharing so we can come back together. Any questions come in, Tom, yet? Tom, you're muted. You're muted.
I'm monitoring. I don't see any questions. I think we nailed it and covered everything everybody needs to know.
Okay. Well, I hope that we were, oh, wait a minute. I forgot to show this. 1 second. Let me just share my screen once again. And here's contact information for each one of us. In case you are too shy to be asking a question right now, our emails and phone numbers appear underneath our the lovely pictures that they throw up on our websites of each of us. And we are certainly happy to entertain any questions that you might have about tonight's presentation or about our individual institutions. We'd like to say, all of us, and I'll give my colleagues a chance to say goodbye as well, but we wish you luck, you know, and we wish you good health as you move through the coming months. Please know that we are there to help. And as I said when we started, the three of us represent over 80 years of experience doing this. And we stay in these jobs because we love it. And we love working with young people. So we invite your questions and your concerns. I'll turn it over to Tom.
So, you know, the recruitment process here from our perspective isn't just about filling a first-year class. It's about recruiting and enrolling alumni who will keep their association for their whole lives. And we just talked about the admission process, and we take particular pains to try and choose the right students at our institutions. But if you go through a good college search, you're doing the same thing. It's a two-way street. So if you do a good college search, there are so many choices in this country. But we want you to be happy, and you'll want to be happy. So hopefully this is helpful in reaching that end, because we need you all as alumni at our institutions. Go off and make your millions of dollars and donate it all back to the schools and keep the circle of life going. So thank you very much. I hope this is helpful for everybody. Tyler?
And donate some of it back to Miami, because I just realized I'm wearing the same exact shirt that I am in the university photo. So clearly I can't afford more than one. So I promise that was not intentional. I do have more Miami shirts than just this one. I think that I can speak for both Ellen and Tom in saying that we've been in doing these jobs for a while. And the one thing that I think we come to this job, so many people think that it's all about getting you to our institution. At the end of the day, Ellen, Tom, and I, we really don't care where you go. We just care that you go, and we care that you go to the school that's right for you. We hope it's Miami. We hope it's Kenyon. We hope it's Case Western. But at the end of the day, this process, like Tom mentioned, is about finding a good fit. I know the process has been complicated by what is happening to you this year and over the past couple months. But be kind to yourselves and know that there are people that really, we're not the office of denial, we're the office of admission. We want to try to help you work through this process in a way that helps you investigate whether or not our schools are a good fit for what you want to accomplish. So be patient, and you'll find that good fit, and hopefully it's one of our three institutions.
So we did receive a question, and it's a pretty interesting question, and that might very well differ from school to school. But the question is, do we know if AP credit policies have changed due to COVID? And I can tell you that ours did not change due to COVID. But it's a very good question, because it's a different application of the test if you're doing online AP testing. So does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I can speak to the public side of the house. As a public institution, our AP policies are actually dictated by the state of Ohio, and that policy did not change for this past year, and there has yet to be a policy change for this upcoming year because the test was offered online. So our score requirements and everything remained exactly the same for any public institution in the state of Ohio when it comes to AP, which is a 3 or higher. You're getting credit for something, and then it typically elevates into the 4s and 5s.
The same thing is true for Kenyon. Our AP policy did not change. And so we are evaluating those tests that were taken in this past spring in the same way that we have in years past.
That should be another column on that spreadsheet that we keep alluding to.
Absolutely.
Because other schools may have different policies than
Sure.
the three of us. We just happen to be aligned.
And especially schools on the public side, if you're going to a public institution in another state, not every state has jurisdiction over that, depending on the way they organize their higher ed system. So you'll really want to check that at every school. It's a great question.
Right. And I suppose if we have one last word for you, it would be this, besides stay healthy: spreadsheet.
It's the magic
Seems
word
to
of
be
the
a
night.
theme today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well,
You're
thank
muted.
you all so much for joining us. At the end, you will see the window. If you could fill out your 4-question survey, we would appreciate it. Also, if you'd like to sign up for more sessions, you can go to www.oacac.org, and the recording will also be available on the website as well after this. Thank you all again so much. We appreciate it.
Thank
Good
you. Be well,
night.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.